Hey there, it's your career insider, Sindy Thomas. Welcome to Season 3 of the Insider's Career Club podcast. We help our clients get the careers they deserve by helping them plan and grow their careers, manage career transitions, or plan a job search strategy. Longtime listeners know me as an in-house talent acquisition professional who's interviewed thousands of candidates and worked with hiring managers to fill positions in my career spanning over 25 years. Want a better career? Get some career coaching. Start today and sign up on our website for a free 20-minute coaching session. Now, when you listen regularly, you'll hear industry professionals share the scoop on their careers. We also have some free career resources on our site too. If you've been passed over for a promotion or a raise, or you're frustrated because you're interviewing but not getting a job offer, then sign up for one-on-one career coaching. You can get the career you deserve. Up next is a great podcast. Stay tuned. Hey there, insiders. It's Sindy. I've got a great guest for you today. His name is Brenden Kumaraswamy. Now, he's the founder of MasterTalk. He coaches ambitious executives and entrepreneurs to become the top 1% communicators in their industry. And he also has a popular YouTube channel, also called MasterTalk, with the goal of providing free access to communication tools for everyone in the world. Let's welcome him in to the show. Brenden, welcome to the podcast.
Sindy, it's such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into talking about your career, let's learn a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up?
Born and raised in Montreal. My parents immigrated from Sri Lanka, which is a tiny country south of India in the early 90s. But I was born and raised in Montreal. I still live there today.
Oh, okay. So are you from a big family?
Definitely a big family. So I think my mom had 7 siblings and my dad had 7 as well.
I have 3 siblings, but my father, I've got the opposite ends with my parents. My mother, only child, my father, 11, of which he survived. Big family, but I don't really know all of them because they're in another part of the country. We know some of them, but we did not grow up with a lot of family around us. We had some, but not as much as, if your whole nuclear family is close to you. But it was good growing up. So tell us a little bit about why you decided to focus on being a master, and I've got that in quotes, air quotes, master communicator.
Yeah, absolutely, Sindy. So for me, it all started in college. I went to business school, and my dream was never to be a entrepreneur. I wanted to be a management consultant at McKinsey. That was my goal. So I did these things called case competitions, which are essentially professional sports for nerds. While other guys my age were playing rugby or football, I was doing presentations competitively.
Ah, okay.
Exactly. And I did get my dream job. I worked as a technology consultant at IBM for many years before I went full-time on MasterTalk. But in that 3-year period, Sindy, where I was competing, I accidentally learned the art of not only how to communicate effectively, but to teach it to other people. And that's what led to the YouTube channel. I later built a business behind it.
Everybody seems to tense up when they think about public speaking. Why do you think it's looked at as being something that's so intimidating to everyone?
So for me, it actually makes a lot of sense why most of us are fearful of communication. And the reason is simply this. All of the memories that we have as a kid around communication are almost all negative. So let me give you an example. If we think about the education system, elementary school, high school, that's where you learn how to present, give formal presentations. But the problem, Sindy, is that all of those presentations have 3 fundamental mistakes, essentially. The first one is that they're all mandatory. We don't wake up one morning and say, hey, Sindy, you want to get breakfast and present all day? Nobody says that. So that's problem number 1. And there's 3 of them. Problem number 2 is all those presentations are different, Sindy. There's a lot of them. So it's not, hey, what are you passionate about? Do you like talking about careers and podcasting and the color orange and other things that are exciting? No, it's you got to talk about Shakespearean poetry. And then after you've done that, you got to talk about the history of Missouri. And you're like, I don't even live in Missouri. Why am I doing this? So we don't really get to pick something we're passionate about. And then you think I'm done, Sindy. The third one is actually the worst of all, which is every presentation is tied to a punishment. So if you don't do a great job, not only do you not get a pat on the back, you lose 20% of your grade. So we think communication is a chore and nobody wants to get better at doing the dishes.
Okay. Yeah. Nobody likes doing the dishes, but I hate having a sink full of them, right?
There you go.
Okay. Well, communication, it's safe to say it affects every part of our lives, right? You can't have a relationship with someone if you can't communicate with them. It's especially intimidating in business because, people remember what you say and they hold you accountable for it. So let's talk about how everyday business people can improve their communication in a one-on-one setting.
Before I get to that, let me suggest a mindset change. I think the problem that I see most business owners or people in general when they try and master communication, it usually comes from the wrong energy. And what I mean by that is they go, oh my God, like I need to get better or else I won't have a great marriage. I need to get better or my relationships will stink. I need to get better or else my business won't grow. Whereas what I would suggest instead is let's dream about our communication skills. In the same way we dream about the stuff we want to buy, in the same way we dream about the vacations that we want to go on this year with our family, let's dream about our communication. And the question to get us started is how would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? How would your life be different? Because you're absolutely right, Sindy. It does affect every moment of our life, but in a good way, because it helps us lead a more fulfilling life. And once we see it from that lens, then we'll have motivation, which I believe is the greatest challenge in communication to even do a lot of the tactics we'll talk about today.
Basically, what you're saying is people are putting too much onus on it too, in a negative way, that if I fail at this, if I don't do a good job, it's going to keep me from being successful. It's going to affect my marriage, my kids, my blah, 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 right?
You got it. And an easy way of seeing this is think about every skill you've learned in your life, whether it was, dancing, running, things that get you really excited. Many of those skills, sure, some of them were mandatory, but many of them were done because you simply enjoy it. Like for me, one fun fact about me is I can karaoke in 8 different languages. Nobody forced me to do that. I just wanted to do that. And that's what creates ownership and allows us to get to the end of that skill.
Okay. So do you speak 8 different languages or you're just good at reading the languages?
It's good that you added that clarification. So I do not speak 8 languages. I speak 3. So I speak English, French, and Tamil, which is still cool. But I can karaoke in 8. You got it.
Wow. Very good. Well, I speak 2 and on only one of those fairly well.
Wait, what's the second one?
Spanish.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Just from studying it in school. I didn't grow up speaking. Well, that's not true. I did grow up in a Spanish speaking environment in the sense that I went to school with a lot of Spanish speaking people in the younger grades.
I love that.
Now, in business, I know that it can be difficult speaking up in meetings because whatever you say is going to be, I don't want to say judged, but it's going to be measured in whatever it is you're talking about, right? So it's very intimidating, but it can be especially difficult for women to be heard. What tips do you have for women to get their points across in meetings without being looked at as being too aggressive? Because women get called pushy just for trying to get their points across. So what are your suggestions with that?
Yeah, absolutely, Sindy. So let me give basic principles for all genders, and then I'm happy to give specifics for women, of course. So let's start with the general piece, which is what are the 3 questions around meetings that we should have regardless of who we are? So the first question is, what is the goal of the meeting? So we'll find oftentimes is when we look at our list of meetings, there's 10% of them that we shouldn't even be in because the goal isn't even clear. So delete those. and I'm being conservative with 10%. I just say 10%.
Yeah, but you have to attend, right? It's stuck on your calendar and your manager says you got to go.
Right. So I would question some of those. The second question is, what is my contribution in this meeting? So let's assume the goal is clear. The next question to think about is how do we contribute more effectively in that meeting if we have to say something? And what we'll realize, another 10% of the meetings on our calendar, the goal is clear, but we don't need to be in the meeting because they can just handle the objectives of it on their own. So you can cancel another 10%. And then the third question is the most important one. And the question is, knowing the goal and contribution is valid, how do I communicate that contribution in a way that inspires and adds value to other people? And the third question is super important because let's say you're somebody in the workplace and you have a very important meeting to attend and you're presenting, then you know which ones are high stakes that week and you know which ones to spend a little extra time on to actually prepare what you're going to say so you come off correctly. So that's part one. Part two is around your other question, Sindy, around women in particular. So my advice for my executive women is very different and has very little to do with communication. What I've found from years of coaching a lot of executives from C-suite all the way down to manager is women generally, whenever they communicate an idea, they generally are over prepared for that. So let me give you an example of what I mean here. So let's say a man and a woman look at a job description and a man looks at it and sees that they can do 2 out of 10 things. Right. They go up to their manager and they say, give me that a position. Whereas a woman might look at that same list of 10 and actually be able to do 9 out of those 10 things or 8. And they'll say, well, I don't have the other 2, so I don't think I can apply for this. So I would always encourage women to do a couple of things. One, look at it objectively, not subjectively. If you feel you have a couple of those line items, push for the role that you don't think you're ready for. And the third piece around your point around being perceived as being pushy or annoying or XYZ, insert objective here. What I always tell women is counterintuitive advice, assuming that the woman has done the 3 questions that I asked earlier. So let's say they come up to me, Sindy and you, and they say, well, Sindy, Brenda, I did what you said. I looked at the goal, I looked at the contribution, I prepared, and I still come off that way and I'm getting that feedback. My advice is very different, which is understand who has the leverage. All you need to have leverage in the workplace, Sindy, is to have 2 job offers, the one that you're working at and the one that you're being asked to work for. So I always get my women to just interview at 10 different companies and have coffees with leadership teams, and whoever the leadership team they like the most, they just work for. That's it. Problem solved.
Yeah, there's a whole lot around that. And it is true that when women look at a job posting, if they can't do the whole job, they won't apply. And I encourage women to apply anyway. But it's also dependent upon what skills they don't have. If they have 80% of the skills and the other skills are something that they can learn, yeah, sure, apply. Now, if it's a rocket scientist and you have some of the skills, but you don't have the piece that, you need to be a rocket scientist, don't apply. But it's true. Women, we tend to think that way. I think it comes from a lot of places in that we feel like we have to be able to defend our points of view because we've had to, because we've been overlooked and, kind of pushed off to the side. So I think it comes from that. But, we do have to have more confidence in ourselves and go for it.
Absolutely. Completely agreed.
Okay. So what are 3 things people can do that you would suggest that they do to improve their presentation skills if they're presenting in front of a group?
Absolutely, Sindy. So I call this my easy 3s. Communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time. One of them is body language. One of them is storytelling. And if we try and juggle the eye contact and the smiling all at once, all of the balls will fall to the floor. So instead, what I recommend is my easy 3s, which is my 3 easiest balls to juggle. So start with number 1. And I'll pause after each one so I don't monologue for 10 minutes here. So the first one is the random word exercise. Pick a random word like trophy, like master, like paper towel, and give random presentations out of thin air. So now the obvious next question is, why should we do this? The reason is simple. If you could make sense out of nonsense, you could make sense out of anything. And that's why the random word exercise is so effective. Do it 3 to 5 times a day. It'll take you 5 minutes to do it 5 times. And ideally, if you have somebody in your house, like a younger child or just family in general or in the shower, just do it a few times and you'll build up momentum really quickly in the skill set. Number 2 is question drills. So we get asked questions all the time at work, Sindy, on a podcast, at school, and most of us are reactive to those questions. I remember a few years ago when I started guesting on shows, somebody asked me the funniest question that I wasn't prepared for. He said, where does the fear of communication come from? And I looked at him and I said, I don't know, man, Los Angeles, San Diego, you tell me. So I had no idea how to answer it. But of course, I became more proactive. I learned my lesson. So every day for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, I would sit down and answer one question, just one, that I thought somebody was going to ask me about my expertise. So day 1, it was, where does the fear of communication come from? Day 2, it was, what tips do you have for introverts? Day 3 was, how do we overcome the fear of communication? And I did that every day for 5 minutes. So when you do that for a year, you'll have answered 365 questions about your expertise, and you'll be bulletproof, especially in the boardroom if you apply that same rationale in the sales pitch.
Okay.
And then number 3 is so simple, nobody does it, Sindy. Make a list of the 5-10 people you love the most in the world. It could be your clients, it could be your family members, and ask ourselves a simple question. When was the last time that we sent them a 20-second, not a 20-minute, 20-second video message just to say how much we appreciate having them in our lives? I force all of my VPs, my SVPs, my CEOs to send these videos to all of the people that they're managing at work. And it really makes a difference for them. It increases retention, increases loyalty, because most people have never received a video message even once in their career. And it makes all the difference.
Yeah, it's a touch point. I could see why that has a positive effect. Because any communication, if it's not, as long as you're not yelling at them, is positive, right? You took enough time to make this 20-second or 30-second video and send it to them. That's wonderful.
Absolutely.
This, making a phone call too, or sending an individual email just to them. So very nice. I think you brought this up. When you do that random word exercise, you're practicing. So we don't think about practicing any of this. We just think we can do it cold, right? That's part of the problem, wouldn't you say?
Right. So a couple of thoughts there, Sindy. I think there's a problem even greater than that, which is most people will listen to these 3 tips, but they won't actually do them, like at all. Like they'll go like, oh, Sindy, like somebody will email you and say, oh my God, Sindy, you brought this Brenden guy on and he taught so many great tips, like the question drill, the video message, the random word. And then you ask them, you reply back, hey, did you actually do any of these? Oh no, I just have them in my notes and I'm never going to do anything. That's the problem. So actually the random word exercise is actually designed to remove any possible excuse for not practicing. So the goal of the random word is to actually do it cold. And the reason is because it builds momentum in movement. And the reason this is so important to do cold is because life is unpredictable. You can jump in as an executive one day and say, hey, I need you to do this presentation. You're like, what? And you had to do it in 10 minutes. I'm sure this happened at least once in all of our careers. And that's what the random word exercise does for us. So when we do it at the beginning, we're going to stink. Somebody gives us the word ring and we're like, ring is, I don't know. And then over time, you just get better at it until you've done it, as many times as I have.
We've all seen a lot of changes happen because of the pandemic. One of the things that, and I can remember being at work and trying to figure out how we were going to deal with the people that we needed to hire while we had the threat of the pandemic coming at us. And so we flexed very early to do interview processes that were done via Zoom or Skype. What tips do you have for candidates to connect with their interviewers during their interviews? Because you don't have the physical presence. It's harder to read on the screen. We know that. But what tips do you have that someone can really make their presence known when they are doing a virtual interview?
Absolutely, Sindy. There's a couple of fun things, and then I'll give you some more serious tips. So let me start with the fun ones. The fun ones is have like a bookcase that's visible in your virtual screen. It creates an unconscious bias from the recruiter's perspective that you read a lot. Whether you read a lot or not is not actually a big problem. It's that you have the bookcase, so people think you do. In terms of how to prepare specifically for interviews, a couple of things that I'll say. Number one, the difference between online and in person is the eye contact is only in one direction online, which is the camera lens. So you're not actually looking at the person's face directly. You're supposed to look at the lens directly. And the best way to practice this is get on a test Zoom call with a friend of yours and have them comment every time you're not looking at the camera lens. That way you practice that beforehand to make sure you're solid in the interview. The second one's obviously appearance. Make sure you look okay and that the background isn't too crazy. You don't have running kids or something. That's the obvious. And the third one, which is actually the same as what I would recommend with in-person interviews, it's just online this time, is there's a special strategy I implemented that I find is crazy that most people don't. When I was looking for consulting jobs a few years ago prior to starting the business, and it's play teams. So what does that mean? I intentionally prepared interviews with people who were looking for the same job as me. And I know that sounds crazy, but the reason is actually really simple. Because if me and two other people that I really trust and really love, if we all look at each other's resumes, look at each other's cover letters, and ask each other questions, like, tell me about yourself. Oh, this is terrible. And we prep each other, we'll be better than any individual candidate in that marketplace. So all of us will get jobs, which is exactly what happens. But the thing is let's assume I don't get a job and everyone else does. I still win. And the reason is simply this. Who's the first person that they're going to refer into their companies? The random schmuck on the street or the person who actually spent every night helping them prepare? Right. They're all going to refer me. And that's what happened when I went through my interviews.
What are some of the things that people can do to improve on their own? You gave us some 3 tips. What can they do on their own, and what can they do in a more formal setting?
So I would say for on their own, what's great about the easy 3s, Sindy, is all these 3 you can actually do on your own. So let's recap that, and then I'll give one for formal presentations. Okay. So random word exercise. You actually don't need to do this as a partner. You can do this alone. Everyone's got 10 minutes, assuming you shower every day. That's basically the assumption I'm making. If not, I have different questions for the person listening to this podcast. So you got 10 minutes there. Just do it there. Or in the morning, I'm just going to spitball a couple of ways you can hold yourself accountable. Another way I like that my clients do who have kids is when they're picking up their kid from school and they're driving back and forth, instead of turning on music, they just do the random word exercise with each other, or they do it over the dinner table. I'll even give you another one just to make sure there's no excuses. Is when you're in a work meeting, some of my CEOs is they start every meeting with the random word exercise and then they jump into the meeting. Oh, so that's another one that people can do. So that's one. Question drills, you don't even need to talk. Literally open a Word document and just write out the answer to the question, and open a voice recorder if you want, enunciate the answer and move on to the next day. That's it. So you can just do this on your own. And for the video message, unless you don't know anybody in your life, which is a bit sad, but I guess send Sindy a video message or send me a video message. I'd love to receive one, or just colleagues at work. So that's the way you can implement this on your own.
Do you have Toastmasters in Canada?
We do. And I always recommend it. I'm a big fan of Toastmaster. I think it's a great environment to find these buddies, and it's not expensive. I think the only analogy I would drive for people who are listening to this who have more senior career roles is Toastmasters is good early in your career because your money is more valuable than your time. So you can sit in a Toastmasters meeting. The only thing I would say that's a bit different, it's not for everybody, it's probably less than 5% potentially of people listening to this, is if you're more senior in the company, then I would encourage you to hire a coach because your time is more valuable than your money. Right. That's the only nuance I would drive.
What books, if someone wanted to read a book or have a book as a reference, are there any books that you'd like to recommend that they could seek out?
Absolutely. I would say the most important thing, then we'll jump into the book, is everyone listening to this, please book 50 minutes in your calendar tomorrow to do the easy 3s. If you do just that, you'll have gotten the result from this podcast, which is I'm going to do the random word exercise tomorrow for 5 minutes. I'm going to do the question drill for 5 minutes, and I'm going to do video messages for 5 minutes. If you just do that, I consider this a big win. In terms of the book, what I'll recommend for people who did book the time for tomorrow to practice, I would say look up Thirst by Scott Harrison. So I'll repeat that again. Thirst by Scott Harrison. So Scott Harrison is the CEO of Charity Water. It's a nonprofit he started to help the world gain access to clean water. And the reason I recommend his book in the context of my expertise, the guy's a masterful storyteller. I think he's one of the best in the world personally. And he's a great practical example of someone who's not only applied a lot of the things we've talked today, but has done it in a way that has helped him raise hundreds of millions of dollars for the causes he cares about the most. And I think there's a lesson for all of us to learn there.
Is there a way or any tips for people that need to get better at storytelling?
Right. So happy to share that. The one thing I will mention, though, as a caveat is for me, the way I define storytelling in my 18-ball analogy of how communication is 18 things at the same time. Storytelling for me is like ball 14 or 16. So if we're not doing the random word exercise, we shouldn't try and practice storytelling. And the reason is simple.
Okay.
And I'll prove it right now. hey, Sindy, let me tell you a story. So once upon a time, there was like, if you don't have the foundations, your story is going to land flat.
Exactly.
So you need to master the basics first. But I'll give the tip for the advanced part of the audience, which is simply this. By Les Brown, never make a point without telling a story, never tell a story without making a point. And what Les Brown means here through his quote is that every story should begin with the lesson in mind first. Because if you just tell the story but it doesn't lead anywhere, then your audience will be lost. So the first,
why did you tell me that? Yeah.
Correct. And I'm sure we all have friends that tell us stories and they just keep rambling on and on and on. You're just like, when is this going to end? Like, what's the point of this? So what's the outcome? So in my case, it's convince people that they become exceptional communicators. So based on that lesson that I want to teach people that anyone listening to this podcast can be great, then I have a restaurant menu of options and opportunities of stories that I can tell to prove my point. And one of them is naturally better than the other. And the one that ultimately won for me after trying out 30 different stories is my own personal story around, having a broken left arm that's still broken to this day, presenting in a second language my whole life. French is technically my first language, so I struggled a lot speaking in French. And then the other piece is I have a bachelor's degree in accounting. Who am I to teach other people how to speak when I was a 22-year-old kid teaching comms to people double my own age? And that's the story I tell people. But notice how that story has a point, which is anyone can be a great speaker.
All right. Where can listeners find you?
Absolutely, Cindy. It's so great to be on, by the way. So two ways to keep in touch. The first one is check out the YouTube channel, which is MasterTalk. In one word, you'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate. And the second way is I do a free workshop over Zoom every 3 weeks. This one's live. It's interactive. It's not some boring webinar. And I facilitate it. So if you want to join that, you can register at rockstarcommunicator.com.
Okay, wonderful. I'll put that in my podcast notes. So Perfect. If they go to the website, they can find you. Brenden, I want to say I'm very pleased that you came to speak with us today. You gave the listeners some wonderful tips and advice on how to be a better communicator, and I appreciate it.
The pleasure was absolutely mine, Cindy. Glad that you made the time as well. Great to be here.
Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for joining us. Now, your support's a blessing, and if you enjoyed the podcast, please give us a positive rating. It helps with our podcast ranking on the major sites like Apple, Google, etc. Our podcasts are released every 2 weeks on the first and third Wednesdays. Now you're needed. Keep listening and share these career-changing podcasts with your friends, your coworkers, and your family. They can also listen on InsidersCareerClub.com as well as the major sites. Are you frustrated because you got passed over for a promotion? Maybe you didn't get a raise, or you're interviewing but not getting job offers. Sindy can help. Get the career you deserve. Sign up for career coaching help with me today. Now, before you go, let's speak victory over your life. You have a bright future. Good breaks are looking for you, and new doors are about to open. Believe it. Until next time, take care.